In the quiet town of Likasi in Congo, there lived a woman named Amara. She worked for the Mwamba family, doing everything without a single complaint. Every day she washed their clothes, folded them neatly, and ironed them so carefully that not a single crease was left. She cooked, cleaned, and made sure everything in the house ran perfectly. For 7 long years, Amara lived in a small back room, away from the main house. She was never invited to sit at the dinner table, never wished a happy birthday, never truly seen. They gave her just enough money to survive, but never enough to dream. Still, Amara stayed. She was quiet, loyal, always in the background, never asking for anything. She had learned to live like a shadow, unnoticed and unheard. But then, one rainy evening, something changed. While doing the laundry like she always did, she found a bright red lipstick stain on Mr. Mwamba's white shirt. It wasn't from Madame Lulu. Amara knew her lipstick colour. This one was different. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a sign, a loud message written in silence. That moment, Amara knew. She had been quiet for too long. Something inside her woke up. It was a rainy evening, the kind where the sky looked heavy and the air felt tired. Amara sat quietly in the small laundry room, her hands moving fast as usual. She had done this routine for years, separating clothes, washing, rinsing, drying, folding, and ironing. Her fingers knew the rhythm by heart. She didn't need to think. But that day, something made her stop. As she picked up one of Papa Mwamba's crisp white shirts, her eyes caught a mark that shouldn't have been there. It was a lipstick stain, bright red, bold, smeared right on the collar. Amara froze. She leaned in closer. Her heart began to beat a little faster, but her face stayed calm. She wasn't someone who reacted loudly. She was used to swallowing things. Pain, anger, hunger, even tears. But this little red mark, it spoke louder than words, and it didn't make sense. She knew Madame Lulu's lipstick shade. Every morning she watched her apply it in the mirror, soft pink with a bit of shine. But this was deep, matte red. She had never seen Madame Lulu wear this colour. Amara touched the fabric gently, her fingers trembling just a little. She stared at the stain like it was trying to tell her something, and deep down, she understood. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. It said something loud and clear. Someone else had been close to Papa Mwamba, close enough to leave a mark that didn't belong. Amara wasn't Madame Lulu, but she felt something twist inside her chest. Not jealousy, not gossip, but pain. Pain for a woman who didn't know what was happening under her own roof. Pain because Amara had been invisible for so long, watching things others missed. She took a deep breath, folded the shirt carefully, and placed it in the ironing basket. But her mind was loud now. Questions started coming, one after another. Who was the woman with the red lipstick? When had she been here? Was it when Madame Lulu went on her business trips? Was it while Amara was in the next room, folding clothes and pretending not to hear footsteps or whispers? She tried to push the thoughts away, but they stayed. Like the stain, they stuck. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She lay on her thin mattress in the back room, listening to the rain tap the window. She closed her eyes, but the image of that red smear wouldn't leave her. It burned behind her eyelids. For 7 years, she had been silent. She had seen things, heard things, little things, quiet things, but always kept them to herself. She had convinced herself it wasn't her place, that loyalty meant silence, that survival meant staying small. But now, for the first time, she felt something shift. In the kitchen the next evening, while scrubbing pots, she overheard Madame Lulu's sister talking in a low voice. "Does she even know?" the sister said. "He brings other women here when she's away." Then came Lulu's laugh. Not shocked, not hurt, just cold. She wouldn't believe it even if she saw it, she said. Amara's hands froze in the soapy water. The pot in her hand slipped and clanged against the sink. But no one noticed. No one turned around. She was used to that. But this time, she didn't want to be invisible anymore. She wiped her hands and walked out of the kitchen, her heart racing. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just walked to her room and sat down. She looked at her bucket, her slippers, her small bag of clothes, the few coins she had saved. She didn't have much, but she had enough to leave. And more than that, she had something new inside her. A voice, a decision. For hours, she sat and thought. The rain outside had stopped, but inside, her thoughts were a storm. She wasn't angry for herself. She was angry for every maid who had ever been treated like a ghost, for every woman who worked in silence and carried secrets that didn't belong to her. She was tired of pretending, tired of being loyal to people who didn't even see her. That red lipstick wasn't hers, but the truth it revealed, that belonged to her now. Before the sun rose the next morning, Amara had already packed her things. She folded her mattress, placed her bucket by the door, and slipped out quietly. No note, no goodbye, no tears, just silence, the kind that speaks louder than words. She didn't know exactly where she was going, but she knew she was done staying where she wasn't respected. She had been a shadow in that house for too long. It was time to step into the light. And even though she left quietly, something loud remained behind. The memory of that red lipstick stain, the moment everything changed, and the silent power of a woman who finally chose herself. Later that night, after a long day of cleaning, folding and cooking, Amara was finishing up her chores. The house was quiet except for the sound of dishes clinking and a soft voice coming from the kitchen. She walked slowly toward the sound, holding a cloth in her hand, just planning to wipe the counter one last time before bed. But then she heard something that made her stop. It was Lulu's sister. Her voice was low, but clear enough for Amara to hear. "Does she even know he brings other girls into the house when she's not here?" she whispered. Amara's heart jumped. She stood still just behind the hallway wall, invisible again, like always. Then came something even worse. Lulu's laugh, a cold, careless laugh, like the words didn't mean anything, like betrayal was something normal, something expected. She wouldn't believe it even if someone told her. Lulu said, brushing it off like a joke. Amara's hand tightened around the cloth she was holding. Her breathing grew slower, heavier. That lipstick stain from earlier suddenly became clear in her mind again. It wasn't just a mark. It wasn't some small accident. No, it was a message. It was a loud, ugly truth hiding in plain sight. She had known it deep down, but now, hearing Lulu's words, it was confirmed. The Mwamba house, so neat on the outside, was full of secrets, and Amara had been right in the middle of it all, staying silent, acting like she didn't see, didn't hear, didn't feel, but she did. For years she had accepted it all, the low pay, the tiny room, the way they looked right through her. She had been treated like furniture, useful but invisible, and she had told herself it was okay. She had convinced herself she was just doing her job, just surviving. But tonight, something inside her broke open. That laugh, that stain, that whisper, they all pushed her past her limit. She stepped away from the hallway and walked back to her small room in the back of the house. It was simple, just a mattress, a bucket, a few clothes, but it had become her whole world, a world of quiet suffering. She sat down slowly and stared at the wall. Her chest felt tight. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were full, not from sadness, but from something stronger, a decision forming. For so long she had believed silence was strength. She thought staying quiet kept her safe, but now she saw the truth. Her silence had only helped others stay comfortable, while she stayed small. She had helped build a house of lies just by not speaking. And that wasn't loyalty, it was fear. And fear was no way to live. As the house settled into the night, Amara stayed wide awake. She thought about Madame Lulu, beautiful, proud, and blind to what was happening behind her back. She thought about Papa Mwamba, smiling in the mornings, handing her dirty shirts in the evenings, and keeping secrets in between. She thought about all the other women like her, working in kitchens, folding clothes, knowing too much but saying nothing. She wondered how many of them had seen a red stain and kept going like nothing was wrong. But Amara couldn't do it anymore. That laugh in the kitchen was the last straw. It wasn't just about the cheating. It was about the disrespect, the way her presence didn't matter, the way they assumed she'd never speak, never leave, never change. She had been treated like she had no eyes, no ears, no heart, but she had all three, and they were wide open now. She stood up and looked around her little room. It was dark, but she could see everything clearly. She saw the years she had given, the dreams she had buried, the voice she had hidden, and she knew it was time. Time to stop being a quiet helper in the shadows. Time to stop being a witness to other people's mess. Time to choose herself. The next steps weren't clear yet. She didn't have a plan, no job lined up, no savings to rely on, but she had herself. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. She folded the cloth in her hand and placed it on the small wooden shelf. She would finish the night's work as always. But in her mind, a door had already opened. Her silence had been broken. Her strength had found a voice. She wasn't angry, not the kind that screams and throws things. She was something else. Calm, certain, ready. The kind of ready that comes after years of holding back. The kind of ready that can't be stopped. That night, as she lay down to sleep, the house outside her room stayed the same. Quiet, polished, pretending. But inside Amara, everything had changed. She wasn't a maid with no story. She was a woman with eyes wide open, ears that heard everything, and a heart no longer willing to stay quiet. She didn't need anyone to thank her, apologize, or understand. She didn't even need them to notice she was different, because she knew, and soon they would too. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the quiet town of Likasi. The Mwamba house looked just the same as always, neat, silent, calm on the outside. But something inside had changed. Lulu walked into the laundry room, expecting to see Amara like always, head down, hands busy, humming softly as she worked. But today, the room felt different, too quiet, too still. She looked around. The laundry was done, the floor was clean, the shelves were wiped, but the space was empty. Amara's plastic bucket was gone, her bar of soap, gone. Her old, worn slippers were missing from the corner. Even her small mattress in the back had been neatly folded and placed against the wall. There was no note, no goodbye, not even a trace of where she had gone. Just silence. Lulu stood there for a moment, blinking, not sure what to say. Then she rolled her eyes and muttered, "She'll be back. They always come back." Her voice was sharp, like she didn't care, but something in her chest tightened. She walked out and didn't speak about it again. She didn't ask her husband. She didn't call around, because deep down, maybe she already knew Amara wasn't coming back this time. In the Mwamba house, life went on like nothing happened. Another maid came. She cooked. She cleaned. But it wasn't the same. The meals weren't as good. The clothes weren't folded the same way. And there were whispers. This one complained more, moved slower, asked questions. Madame Lulu grew impatient. Papa Mwamba stayed quiet, but neither of them dared to speak Amara's name. It was like her silence had turned into something louder than words. Her absence filled every room. But far from Likasi, something new had begun. Amara didn't run away. She walked, calmly, with her back straight, her head high, and her small bag held close. She didn't cry. She didn't look back. She had spent 7 years giving everything to a family that barely saw her as human. And now she was walking towards something better. She didn't know exactly what that better would look like, but she knew what she wouldn't accept anymore. Being invisible, being used, being small. Her first stop was Lubumbashi, a bigger city where the streets were louder and faster. She stayed with a distant cousin for a few days, sharing a mattress on the floor and eating simple meals. But Amara had something that many people didn't: experience. She knew how to run a household better than most. She could fix a broken tap, manage a kitchen, raise children, and keep everything spotless without being asked. And more importantly, she now knew her worth. She started talking to women, other maids, cleaners, cooks, in parks, in markets, outside churches. She asked questions. Are you paid on time? Do you have a contract? Do you know your rights? At first, they looked at her like she was strange, but slowly, some began to listen, some began to nod, some began to cry. They all had stories. Long hours, no respect, no rest days, no voice. Amara didn't just listen. She began to organize. With help from a local NGO that supported women's rights, she started something new, the Domestic Empowerment Initiative. It wasn't just a fancy name, it was a place, a voice, a movement. Every week, she held small sessions in a borrowed community hall, teaching women about labour rights, how to ask for fair contracts, how to say no to abuse. She taught them to believe that being a maid didn't mean being less. She had no degree, no money, no fame, just her story and her courage. And soon, word began to spread. A billboard went up in Lubumbashi with her face on it. Not glamorous, just strong. It read, "We don't just clean your homes, we build our futures." Women began coming in groups. Some brought their employers to the meetings, others came in secret, but they came because they saw in Amara someone who had lived what they were living, and she had broken free. Back in Likasi, the Mwamba house kept pretending, but then, one day, their new maid filed a complaint. She said she was underpaid, overworked, disrespected. The story got picked up by a journalist. The story spread. People started connecting the dots. Reporters found Amara. They asked her questions. She didn't name names. She didn't attack. She simply spoke the truth about silence, about strength, about dignity. Her voice was calm, but powerful. Every word carried weight. One day, Lulu showed up at Amara's office. Her eyes were red, her voice shaky. "We didn't know you were watching," she said quietly. Amara looked at her for a moment, then replied, just as quietly, "But I was, and now the world is too." And that was the end of the conversation, because Amara wasn't a maid anymore. She was a leader, a voice, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful protest is not noise. It's absence. It's walking away. It's no note, no goodbye, just gone. Weeks after Amara left the Mwamba house, the city of Lubumbashi began to whisper her name, not as a maid, but as a woman who stood for something bigger. The same hands that used to wash clothes and scrub floors were now writing plans, drawing charts, and helping other women find their voices. She didn't have a degree. She didn't wear expensive clothes or carry a fancy phone. But when she walked into a room, people listened, because Amara spoke with quiet strength, the kind that only comes from real pain, real work, and real change. She had found support from a small but powerful NGO that worked with women in the informal workforce. They were the first to say yes when she explained her idea, a place where domestic workers like her could learn, speak, grow, and protect themselves. She called it the Domestic Empowerment Initiative. It started with just a few chairs in a borrowed classroom, but soon women started to come. At first they were shy. They sat with their hands in their laps, unsure if they were even allowed to ask questions. But Amara made them feel safe. She told them, "You are not just maids. You are managers of homes. You are builders of families, and you deserve respect." She began training them on the things she had learned the hard way: how to ask for a written contract, how many hours they should work, when they had the right to say no, and how to spot signs of emotional or physical abuse. She taught them how to speak firmly but respectfully. She showed them how to write their own resumes, how to track their wages, and how to plan for their future. The women began to sit taller in their chairs. They began to bring friends. Soon, there weren't enough seats. One day, a large billboard went up in the middle of Lubumbashi city. It had a picture of Amara, simple and proud, standing with a mop in one hand and a notebook in the other. The text read, "Household manager, know your rights." Amara's Domestic Empowerment Initiative. At the bottom was her slogan, "We don't just clean your homes, we build our futures." People began to talk. Some laughed. "A maid on a billboard," they said. Others felt proud, especially the women who had once felt invisible. They saw Amara and saw themselves. Not small, not powerless, but important. She began getting invited to local radio shows and women's meetings. Her calm voice reached ears that had never heard a maid speak this way before. She never shouted. She didn't blame or attack. She just told her truth. "Respect is not a gift," she said once on air. "It is a right, and it begins with how we see ourselves." Soon, employers started attending her sessions too. some out of curiosity, others out of fear. They sat and listened as Amara explained things they had never thought about. How isolation can feel like a prison, how a kind word can change a life, how power doesn't make you better, it makes you responsible. Amara started building small toolkits, printed guides in simple language with pictures, showing domestic workers how to protect their rights, how to handle emergencies, how to build savings. She launched a small WhatsApp group where women could share their experiences and get advice. Some posted stories about being shouted at for things they didn't do. Others asked, "Is it okay if they don't give me a day off?" The group became like a sisterhood. No one was alone anymore. All this grew from one woman's quiet decision to stop accepting disrespect. She hadn't planned to become a leader. She had only wanted peace. But sometimes, peace is not just silence. Sometimes, it's power. One Saturday afternoon, a group of girls who had just finished a training session stayed back to ask her something. "Amara," one of them said, "how did you learn to speak like this? To believe in yourself?" Amara smiled softly. "I didn't," she said. "Not at first. I stayed quiet for a long time. I thought that was strength, but then I realized strength is speaking when it scares you. Strength is walking away, even when you have nowhere to go. Strength is knowing your worth, even when others don't." They listened like she was telling a story they'd never heard, but always needed. That evening, as the sun set over Lubumbashi, Amara stood outside the small office they used for the initiative. The sky was orange, and the wind was soft. She looked up at the billboard, her picture, her words, her new life, and felt something rise in her chest. Not pride, not revenge, just peace, real peace. Because she knew that the hands which once folded other people's clothes were now shaping futures. The voice that once stayed silent in hallways was now teaching others to speak. And the woman who was once invisible had become a light for so many others still trapped in the shadows. And she wasn't going back. Months passed, and the Mwamba family hired a new maid. But things didn't go the way they expected. The new girl didn't stay quiet like Amara did. One day, she bravely spoke out, accusing the family of abuse and mistreatment. Her story spread like wildfire. People were shocked. It wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was news. The internet picked it up, and soon everyone was talking about it. The story went viral, and people started asking questions. Reporters dug deeper, and many of them came looking for Amara. They wanted her to confirm the story, to expose the family. But Amara didn't point fingers. She didn't mention any names. She simply spoke the truth about the way so many domestic workers are treated, with disrespect, silence, and fear. One afternoon, Lulu showed up at Amara's small office. She didn't look like the proud woman from before. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice shaky. She stood in front of Amara and said, "We didn't know you were watching." Amara looked at her, calm and strong. Then she replied, "But I was. And now the world is too." She didn't yell, she didn't smile, just the truth. And Lulu stood there, quiet, with nothing left to say.